Are you ready for warm weather and some travel? Well, grab your favorite tropical drink and learn how dementia and caregiving don't have to be an end to your vacation dreams. And because traveling is more fun with friends, be sure to share this episode with other caregivers, because this travel episode is all about supporting caregivers while giving them a much needed vacation. Welcome to Fading Memories, the podcast for caregivers of loved ones with dementia. I'm your host, Jennifer Fink. My mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years, and when I went looking for answers, I had to start a podcast to find them. Join me as we navigate the challenges of dementia caregiving together. This podcast is your beacon of support and empowerment. Let's share our experiences, find solace, and discover the strength within us. Get ready to embark on a transformative caregiving journey with Fading Memories. If you're looking for additional advice, be sure to sign up for our weekly email newsletter. It's brief, gives you great advice. You can read it in less than 5 minutes, and you know where to find the link. It's in the website, on the show notes. We're working on subscriber-only information and specials, so you're not going to want to miss out. Did you know that midlife metabolic changes can impact your brain health? Women often experience changes in energy regulation during midlife, feeling fatigued or having reduced energy. In addition to eating a Mediterranean diet, exercise, and stress management, one way to protect your brain health is to add Relevate from NeuroReserve to your day. With Relevate, you get science-backed nutrition to help strengthen and protect your memory and cognitive performance today and for years to come. You deserve a brain span that lasts your lifespan. And to help you get started, use the link in the show notes and code FM15 to get 15% off any regular order. I've been taking Relevate for 3 years now, and I've seen an improvement in my memory and thinking. Now, on with our show. Thanks for joining me again, listeners. I know you're going to totally enjoy today's episode. With me is Lisette Klute. I got that part right. She has a website called Think Different Dementia and a podcast that is Dementia Caregiving for Families. Oh my God. Mark this one down. I got them all correct on a Monday that started out with no electricity. So Lisette just got back from a cruise for specifically for caregivers and their dementia loved ones. And that's not the best terminology, but you guys get it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is vacations and memories and why we need to take them and make them while we can. So thanks for joining me, Lisette.
Thank you very, very much for having me. And yes, both our days started off not as anticipated. I literally got home at 1 a.m. We're recording this on a Monday without my luggage, without my makeup. And poor Jennifer woke up without power. So between the two of us, we're doing pretty well for a Monday morning.
Yep, but I'm in California. That is, I've learned that people on the East Coast don't understand the term atmospheric river. But if you just think about the two words, so atmospheric, so in the atmosphere and river. So essentially, a river is pouring down on us, and those of us who, like myself, are solar charged, we're suffering.
Yes.
I need a vacation. So I'm going to have to live vicariously through what you just had, which you said was humbling.
Yes.
But so let's start off with, what's the name of the company that you went with? Because I know I've talked to them in the past. Mm-hmm. And it's Elite Cruises and Vacations?
That is correct. It is owned by a registered nurse by the name of Catherine Schoaf. And it was humbling, gratifying, terrifying, wonderful, all, wrapped up into a tight little ball. And I cannot wait to go back again. It was truly one of the best experiences, but at the same time, one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my entire life.
Okay. Well, you went as a speaker, so you did not travel with somebody living with dementia.
No, I did not, but I was a speaker as well as a helper, which meant that we were pretty much on duty 24 hours a day, taking care of these. There were 9 family members, 9 people living with dementia, and their families, and 8 staff members that came with to help and to assist these people living with dementia and their families, so that they could do 2 things. Number 1, make memories, and number 2, for the family caregivers, have some respite and some support for themselves.
That sounds like a pretty good pairing. That's not the right word I'm thinking, but the percentages of staff to vacationers sounds good.
Yes, it was about for the people living with dementia, we were almost one-on-one, or we could be almost one-on-one. When we were divided into the caregiver respite and the times that we were supporting them, we were less than one-on-one, because some of the supported crews, staff support members, were working with the primary care partner. And not everybody utilized the respite times. So I would say we would have about 6 people that we were supporting, that I was helping keep them occupied and engaged, while their family members were either on respite by going and having a massage, or having their fingernails done, or having their hair done, or whatever they wanted to do on the sea days while we were at sea, or going to the caregiver respite times, where there are prior people who have walked their walk, who are actually doing some support with them. So it was very comprehensive. It's very well planned and very well put together.
So where were you guys cruising to, from and to and back?
This particular cruise left from Fort Lauderdale, and we went all the way to Aruba, then we went to Curacao, and then we went to Bonaire, and then stopped at Half Moon Cay in the Bahamas, and then came back. So it was a 9-day cruise, of which the first 3 days we were at sea. So a lot of the educational components occurred during those 3 days. We did different speakers. I spoke on activity engagement. We had another speaker speak on caregiving tips and strategies. And then in the afternoon, we had the respite circles, where we divided up between supporting the people living with dementia and their care partners.
That sounds fantastic. And I'm assuming the weather was a whole lot better than California is right now.
Oh, it was glorious. I have never, ever seen such beautiful, beautiful blue skies and oceans. We were entirely blessed. I have never been on a cruise before, so for me it was a massive learning experience in just just things you don't know what you don't know. I tell my family caregivers that all the time. If you don't know what you don't know, because I've never been on a cruise, I didn't realize quite how special a cruise this was in related to what they call the ABCs. The Aruba and Bonaire and Curacao are not apparently always on a particular cruise. So this was a highly sought after cruise, and I had no idea. I just showed up.
Well, that's good. The only cruise I've been on to is one of those booze cruises to Ensenada, Mexico. It's like 3 days, and I don't drink, so I was with a bunch of people who do, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, that's not fun if you don't drink and everybody's drinking around you.
Yeah, no. And then we've had COVID and all the horror stories. And so it's like, I like our trailer. But there's not support for if you've got your loved one with you that's living with dementia. So you said the first 3 days while you were at sea, going from Florida to the Caribbean, if I got my geography right. And my husband's from New York. They studied geography. I have explained to him that I am from California. We did not need to study geography because California is the center of the universe and the sun revolves around us. Okay. That's why I don't know squat.
Yes, we were in the Caribbean. We were about 19 miles from Venezuela.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the first 3 days you said there was a lot of educational stuff. So why don't you
Right.
talk about what you guys were sharing and why that's an important part of these cruises, why somebody should, you kind of think I'm on vacation. I really don't want to learn about caregiving. I want to get away from it. But why should we not feel that way?
Well, related to the education, every cruise is a little bit different. Kathy brings different presenters in. She puts together different packages of education for people living with dementia. It is very important for one of the biggest challenges caregivers have frequently is that they don't have the education they truly need in order to actually do this journey or do this journey well. Frequently people tell you, but I don't know what to do to keep my loved one busy or occupied or engaged in activities. So that was the series of 3 that I did. The first presentation I did, we talked a little bit about staging of dementia and trying to truly explain to the family caregivers who a lot of times have heard the word staging of dementia but didn't really know what it meant for them and with their specific loved ones. So it was able to make it a little bit more practical for them. And then they could ask questions because now we know the people that we are supporting and the people that are with us. So it's easier for us as a group of professionals then to help the family members see, oh, this is where you are right now in your journey and what that practically means. Then the
So that
second,
staging of dementia is actually, you'd be surprised, not a phrase I'm super familiar with. So why don't you explain that one? I'm sure I'm familiar with it, but not worded that way.
Sure.
But for those people who are also probably not super clear on the topic.
Right. So the medical model uses the words staging of dementia just to make it easier to describe to one another what we're looking at, what we see. There are lots of different staging tools in order to, it's just kind of taking the big picture and narrowing it down and saying, oh, this is where the person's functioning. In brief, there are 2 primary staging tools that I use. The one is called the Functional Assessment Staging Tool, which is a model of retrogenesis, which is just a big fat fancy word for meaning back to the beginning, which describes the journey and the process that a person's brain is going through from where they were normal functioning all the way through to the end of a dementia caregiving process. What I like about it is because it follows a lot of developmental chronological milestones, it makes it a lot easier to actually explain to family why I would say, your mom's not safe to be home alone. Yes, she's a 90-year-old adult, but her brain is processing information like a 5-year-old or like a 6-year-old. So it makes it very concrete for families to then be able to truly understand, oh, I wouldn't leave a 5-year-old home alone, but because my mom is 90 and she's always lived alone, I believe that she still is capable, but she's taking in information the way a 5-year-old would. So it makes it very down and dirty and practical. I have to be very careful and very sensitive when I'm talking to people because I understand this is not a 5-year-old child. I understand that. However, they are processing information the same way. So it's a very practical way of being able to express to people where they are, because most people have been around children and developmental milestones and know intuitively that they wouldn't leave said 5-year-old alone, but they're doing that with their 90-year-old mother who's thinking in the same way. So it's a very handy way of explaining to families exactly what they are looking at. But an easier way of looking at staging is really another way: mild, moderate, and severe. And the way I describe that is, in mild dementia, this is a person who is still physically and mostly cognitively able to do everything for themselves. They're just starting to make mistakes. They're just starting to be late for appointments, or not necessarily understanding some of the consequences of their actions. But for the most part, the mistakes they're making and so on are not mistakes that are going to have dire consequences. They're maybe making decisions that they wouldn't have made before, like putting something metal in the microwave or things like that. But, for the most part, they are still pretty safe, and they can live alone, and they have fair quality of doing things, but people are starting to notice it falling apart. Then the middle bucket is the bucket where the person physically can do everything for themselves, but they cannot think it through for themselves anymore. And they really only need you to tell them what to do. They need help with sequencing things, putting it in the right order, or picking the right clothes for a fancy meal out because, it's raining in California and they may not put the right clothes on to go out in the rain, those kinds of things. So they can do everything physically, but they just need thinking assistance. So sequencing and those kinds of things, quality control. They won't notice, like, for example, their clothing is dirty, needs to be changed, things like that. So that's the middle bucket. Need somebody to walk alongside, not literally hold their hand, but verbally problem solve and help them do things. And this person needs a lot of supervision. And then the last bucket is the last stage, where the person needs both physical assistance and thinking assistance. So those are three buckets that make it also very easy to explain to people where somebody is functioning. And when you understand the stages of dementia, it really can make it easier for you as a family caregiver to understand how much support you need to provide the person that you're helping.
Well, I love so I'm familiar with all of that. You just worded it different, but that was probably one of the best explanations I've ever heard. I've been doing this a long time. I especially liked the retrogenesis, where you're talking about basically they're reversing through abilities, because you always hear, you can't treat them like children, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking, but they're acting like a 4-year-old or, whatever. And so the way you put it was just beautiful. So that was one of your talks, or?
Yes, that was one of the talks. It was about a 45-minute talk. The middle talk was a little bit more practical on just explaining, how to engage people in activities, what kind of things that we can look at, how to physically structure things, how much help to give cognitively to them. It was the one that was the hardest and probably not the best received. The first one was really well received. The middle one, everybody was super tired. And the last one, everybody was really, really engaged, because in the last presentation, we really went into a lot more how to actually cue, how to provide the verbal support or the physical support, or when to start adding those kinds of supports to the family, for the family caregiver, in order to make it easier. And so that one was really very well received. So they were three unique presentations, each in their own can stand alone, but the first and the last were definitely the ones that were the most well received.
Yeah, I probably would have benefited from learning how to cue my mother better, because I took over her care when she was in the later stages. She was still physically mobile, could walked and everything with no aids, talked fairly understandably, although I took care of her for 3 years. So as it progressed, everything sounded like a normal sentence. Like you just walked into the middle of a conversation and you're like, I got to catch up. although that was never an option. So she never got to that mumbling stage. There was a gal in the memory care that walked around and mumbled to herself, and she'd come up to you and try to engage with you in a conversation, and it was all mumble or occasionally Celtic Irish, which was not something I speak. So it was always a challenge, but my mom, the more help she needed, the less she accepted. And so I think cueing would have been definitely beneficial for everybody in my mom's orbit because we all needed better help with that one. So that was what you guys were doing on the first 3 days. Besides the learning, what are you doing while you guys are at sea? Because I could just hear now people are like, why would I want to spend the money on a cruise to take my loved one with me and then sit there and listen to these things? I could do that wherever else, podcast, YouTube.
Sure. To be very clear, it's only about 2 hours in the morning that the education is on the sea days, and then in the afternoon it's about 2 hours, 2 to 2.5 hours in the afternoon when we're doing the respite. But there is very much a lot of eating.
One of my favorite hobbies.
Probably some of the best food I've ever had in my life, and a lot of fellowship. So we spent a lot of time together. Families can have there are two ways people tend to do this. Some of the families stayed fairly well with the group, always ate together as a group. Some of the families were a little more comfortable and confident in their own abilities. And so they spent a little more time alone. They didn't come to all of the meals together. But there's a wide variety of opportunities for people. And then in the afternoon after the respite, families could go on activities. There are a lot of activities on the boat, on the ship. I keep being told it's a ship, not a boat. But I keep calling it a boat, on the ship for people to do a variety of different things. There are arts and craft activities, there's spas, the swimming pool, there was a casino, there was music, just all sorts of other activities. And then in the evening after dinner, some people would retire to their room because their loved one needed more rest. But some of them would go out and dance and go sing and do those kinds of things in the evening. The group is very diverse, or each group is very different. So it really is going to depend on the needs of the family that are coming on the tour. We had one family that was a mom and a dad and their adult daughter. So mom would come to certain things, the daughter would go to other things. They just decided for themselves what they needed. So it's very specific to what your own particular needs and desires are. There were some families that needed more respite and not as much family caregiving education, where they would just leave their loved one and go to the pool, go to the spa, do their own self-care while we were engaging with their family members. And then there were other families that truly needed that support from the caregiver circle, providing them strategies to try to help with their emotional resilience for this journey.
Did the people living with dementia, some of them get together in kind of like little friend groups?
It was absolutely wonderful to see. Each group is going to be different. There was an older woman who was there with her husband, late 60s, early 70s, and she is very aware that she has dementia and would actually express that to us. There was a gentleman who took it upon himself, very significantly cognitively impaired already, but would put his arm around another gentleman who was younger than him, who also had dementia, and seemed to truly connect with him on an emotional level. Even though they couldn't really communicate, they were communicating.
my mom had friends in memory care,
Mm-hmm.
which was probably the best part of her memory care stay. Her living with me would have been terrible for everybody, her, me, and I've talked about that before on other episodes, but the mischief and mayhem she got involved with these other ladies. And so most of my listeners know my mom's name was Diane. She befriended Diane Stewart, and they befriended Diane Rabinski. And so I referred to them as Diane, and other Diane, because it was freaking confusing as it was without a cognitive impairment. And it just, like my mom liked to sit around and shoot the breeze.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she wanted to do. And when you're cognitively functioning normal, whatever normal is for you. And you, like for me, I had a business to run and a household to maintain and blah, 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 things I wanted to do. It was very hard to just sit there and shoot the breeze because I couldn't, being in that reality was really difficult because it was hard to shut off my brain going, okay, now we could be doing and running through the to-do list or the want to-do list. It was just, it was so hard. And I would show up for visits and the three of them would be sitting out in the beautiful courtyard, just blah, 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 blah. And it was wonderful. I'm going to start writing down some of the stories because I think people have a very negative view of memory care residences. And I'm not going to lie, the day we moved my mom's stuff in, there was a gentleman there in his flannel pajamas with a teddy bear stuffed down the back of his pants. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. And it all worked out fine. But, it's hard. And you don't think about the support they give each other.
Yes.
Because it's somebody that's like you, that's part of your team or your tribe. It's like a person that's like you. It's not going to criticize you. So that's why I asked that question. Because
I think you bring a very valid point. I want people with dementia to stay at home if it's the right thing for them. But it isn't always the right thing for them. And it isn't always the right thing for the family caregiver. But there is a lot to be said about the socialization that the people received, that everybody received on this cruise. When we had the respite times where we were engaging with the people with dementia and working with them so that the family could go take a break. The socialization that they were able to have was very, very good to see. And then the other part of this cruise that really was remarkable, and it's ironic because last night, as on my way back home from the cruise, I ended up at the airport waiting on my flight. My flight was really, really late in the evening, but I went and got myself a glass of wine because I'm like, now I'm done. I'm tired and I'm done. And so I went to the bar on the airport, and I had a glass of wine, and there was a couple sitting right next to me, and I recognized the gentleman, and we just struck up a conversation. And he's like, well, we were also on the cruise with you. And then they started to talk about what they had observed. Because on the last day, when we were at Half Moon Cay, they actually were right next to us on the beach, where we had these people who have, some of them moderately severe physical impairment, some of them definitely, significant cognitive impairment. Some of them you couldn't tell as much because physically they're still doing pretty well. But they literally were right next to us on the beach. And they said it was one of the best things to watch us help these people who are having challenges using beach wheelchairs to get them in the water, to get photos with them and their family, and just the care and the dedication that Kathy and her team did to keep everybody safe, which you don't think about. A beach can be pretty hazardous, and uneven surfaces and sand and those kinds of things. But what struck me from the conversation I had with them was that they noticed, without me even saying anything, that they noticed that this was a group that was supporting another group.
That's a good, that says, shows you guys did a really good job, that they noticed and were impressed.
Yeah. They were very impressed.
That's awesome. That's kudos for Kathy and the rest of you that were doing this. She does this all the time. So
Yes,
I
she
don't know how
does
she
this.
survives.
She is a phenomenal woman. She has a lot of passion to help people. She has a core group of staff that travel with her, alternating people depending on schedules. She always makes sure that everybody is staffed appropriately to ensure that the people have the right level of support for them.
I'm assuming she's aware before everybody gets on board at what stage the people living with dementia are at, so that you can staff appropriately.
It is a little challenging to sometimes get accurate information related to that, because oftentimes families do not necessarily recognize the challenges that their person actually exhibits. So, for example, one of the questions she always asks is, has your loved one ever walked away from home? Right? To ensure that we have the right strategies in place for somebody who might wander. Well, the opportunity there is sometimes people haven't wandered at home, but then you get into an unfamiliar surrounding and then they wander there. So yes, all attempts are made to ensure that the person that we know what the person's abilities are before they get there. The reality of the matter is, the night before, when everybody gets together, that's the first time we get eyes on and be able to say, okay, this is what this is where the person is. This is what we need to be aware of. But things change, dementia changes on a daily basis. So
Yep.
It's also not always reliable to see what somebody looks like when they just got off of a plane after having traveled, and then they're different the next day when they wake up again. And then people definitely were different depending on their own fatigue levels after a busy day out, onto the island of Aruba and doing things. So that was what was so humbling for me, is to see. It's one thing to know and go and see people for hour blocks as a therapist, or even go visit my mom and dad and spend several hours with them. But to have spent this extended period of time with these families, and then to truly see the vast differences from day to day and moment to moment, really was experientially for me the best education I could have received.
I can see that. Yeah, it's a whole lot different when you get a 24-hour look at somebody versus an hour look. That's a whole lot of different
It's
data
very
points.
different, very different. And the reality of the matter, I love therapists dearly. I am one. I'm an occupational therapist, but we can be pretty nearsighted, I think, sometimes in just focusing on what we deem to be the skilled thing that we're trying to fix, right? The balance or the whatever. And I think therapists need to be taught more, and it's one of the things I'm striving to do, to take a bigger bird's eye view of the situation, because I don't think therapists necessarily, and they're not doing it on purpose. I know they're not doing it on purpose, but they're not factoring into their equation of, home exercise program or education, the fabric of the household, and the reality that, mom may have 3 doctor's appointments, dad may have another 2, and I may have 1 all in 1 week. And you're trying to, get me to do XYZ as therapy, with the person. So it was very educational to see how we, as a medical model, as a healthcare provider, excuse me, can actually change what we're doing to actually facilitate increased carryover by changing a little bit how we actually interact with the family and looking at the big picture.
That makes perfectly good sense. And we need to send all of you guys on cruises like this.
I'm sure they would all love to.
Well, I would hope so. So we've talked about all of the benefits of going, except for creating memories with your loved one. And that actually gets a lot harder. I'm not sure people are really aware of that. My mom's been gone for about 4 years, and a lot of the memories are challenging ones. They're not, it's like, yeah, we had a nice time at the park, but getting her from the building to the car, from the car to a bench in the park, it's just like, it's hard to not, you almost have to like chop out the challenging parts so you can remember the good stuff. But
yes,
why should somebody consider spending the money for a cruise like this? Besides, okay, we know we're getting respite, we know we're getting education, but that last component of building memories, I think, is as important, maybe one of the most important.
I think it's one of the most important parts of this whole cruise. It's because the way a cruise is set up, where you take a lot of the stress off of the family to actually go make the meals, go shopping, do the laundry, make the bed, just all the stuff that you have to do on a day-to-day basis. You've created energy and act by having all of those things taken care of. For example, I never once made up my bed. I picked up a phone and I said, steward, would you please bring me clean towels? Would you come fix the room? So a lot of those things are built into the cruise, which means you get up in the morning, you can have room service delivered to your room, have a cup of coffee with your loved one, not be rushing to try to get your breakfast done and all of those kinds of things. Get them ready for the day, go downstairs, sit down at a full course meal, breakfast, interacting with other adults who are all experiencing what you're experiencing. So they have a commonality with you. You don't have to explain to anybody why Susie's off the chain this morning, because everybody gets it. Everybody understands. That pressure is taken off of you. So throughout the whole entire experience, everybody's taking photos. We're all taking photos of one another, with one another, different literally snapshots of people's day where we can catch the person with dementia with this huge big fat grin on their face that you might not have caught because you're busy doing something else. So taking the stress of you off of you related to just everyday kinds of activities really frees you up to then create these moments of joy. But consistently throughout this cruise, we are all reminding the people on the cruise, make the memories, go swim, go sit and drink a milkshake up on the top deck, go sit in the sun, take them for a walk, look at, around. I mean, it's just beautiful. And then just watching the families who were there all had these huge smiles on their faces as they saw the person that they're supporting enjoy themselves. So it was making a lot of wonderful memories. And then, we take them out on excursions. The families have choices related to whether they, the cruise line has lots of different types of excursions. But then we also did excursions with some of the people. So there's a variety of, you can create your own memory by choosing your excursion or go on an excursion with us. and get to hear all of our bantering and laughing and helping and supporting.
That just sounds amazing. And I never would have thought, and this just shows you how all these everyday things that we have to handle, breakfast, meals, walking the dog, etc., how that's just it's kind of pressure. It's not necessarily bad pressure, but it's just things we got to do.
It's responsibility.
That's the right word. And you remove all that, it makes making the memories so much easier. Yeah. Like if somebody had transported my mom to the park, she and I would go watch kids. That was the one activity that I could do with her that made her happy. Everything else I tried, complete failure. And it was probably because, one, I was trying too hard, and two, there was all of this responsibility to make sure she got in and out of the car safely. And she was, like I said, she walked just fine without any aids. But God forbid there was a change in the surface we were walking on. So if you went from the sidewalk to the grass, you would get the arms spinning. And you would have thought this woman was about to just collapse over in a heap. And it was just because her brain could not process why does it feel different now? So there was this constant concern about getting her from point A to point B. And I never really realized that was why making the memories was such a challenge, just because of that intense responsibility that I felt for her.
And then the other thing, when the staff are there, the staff is always aware of what's needing to be done. So, for example, in the dining room, this is a cruise. There are thousands of people on this ship, not the boat. And Johnny needs to go to the bathroom. Well, we send Eric, the staff member, so that Susie doesn't need to get up from dinner to take her husband to the bathroom. So it brings the level of stress down. We cannot take it all away because we're not with them overnight. But a large extent is the burden is carried by multiple people for the period of the cruise, allowing you to actually enjoy yourself with the person that you love.
Do you think that after being on this cruise, more caregivers are fully understanding why they need a team of support? Because now they've had it, now they're going home and they may not have it. Likely they don't. You think
they likely don't have the support. I think that's a really good question. I would divide the group into three. About a third of the group are not going to change anything because they're not ready to change. Even though they have seen and experienced the support and the opportunities that they had, they are still so focused on their own frustrations or challenges or inability to actually change their own mindset about the experience that they're in. They are still not ready to change. They're not ready to be a caregiver. So about a third of them kind of fell in that group. About a third of them are doing everything they can to put support systems around them. And then the middle third is that halfway in between where they're starting now to realize they need to do something, but are just exploring what that looks like.
Which makes sense because everybody's at a different stage of their caregiving journey. After hearing this whole conversation, I'm thinking, if somebody doesn't go home and understands the need, the absolute importance of having a team, well, they may never understand it, unfortunately.
No, they may never understand it. And that is unfortunate. And, part of what we want to do is help facilitate people's growth as a caregiver, as a care provider to somebody who they are helping. But the reality of the matter remains, it is up to you as the care partner of a person to change. It's not the person living with dementia is not going to change. And whether you want to be a caregiver or not, you're now a caregiver. And if you stay in the I don't want to be a caregiver mode, it's never likely going to change, and it's probably going to suck.
Yep.
Right. But
Yep.
if you really start to think to yourself, okay, I didn't, nobody signs up for this. Nobody wants to do this. It's not like I want to have a baby. I want to be pregnant and have a baby. Nobody wants an adverse, challenging thing in their life, whether it's cancer or COPD or lung cancer or a head injury or whatever. Nobody wants these things. Nobody wants to get divorced. Nobody wants somebody they love to pass away. Nobody wants those things. Nobody wants to necessarily be a caregiver, right? But we can control how we respond to the situation. That's what we can control. We cannot control the situation, but we can control how we respond to it. And so that's what I want family caregivers to realize, that when you choose to respond in a different way to the circumstance, you can make it easier. It doesn't take it all away, but it definitely makes a massive big difference, because when you're in that camp of, I'm not going to change how I respond, well, the situation's still going to dictate what happens.
You're not changing your response might make it worse.
Exactly. And
kicking and screaming the entire way is not going to make it fun.
No. And a lot of people, unfortunately, never actually get out of that particular. And I understand why. I mean, a lot of people, we have drama. People have drama in their lives. I'm not, people were abused by that person that they're caring for, or they were abandoned, or there was alcohol involved, or, whatever the, dysfunctional families, all of that stuff play a role. I understand that. But the reality is you can still choose how you respond to it. And when you empower yourself with that decision, like I grew up in a household where, my parents used a lot of alcohol. We were never abused per se, like smacked around or, bloody noses and hit, faces through the wall type of abuse. But we were probably abandoned to a large extent, at least emotionally, never financially, never in stuff, but emotionally, my sister and I were definitely abandoned when we went to boarding school. And I had a choice. I mean, I had a choice I could make, right? I could say I was abandoned as a kid. Oh, woe is me, and doom and gloom. My mom and dad did this to me. But one day I realized, I'm okay with who I am, and I am who I am because of what I went through. So therefore, I cannot hate what I went through. And I was able to put it behind me. And now I have no animosity towards my parents related to the fact that we were in boarding school. And it doesn't bother me that I have to help them, because you know what? It's the right thing to do. But I understand not everybody can make that shift. But if they cannot make that shift, then they shouldn't assume the responsibility of being the primary caregiver. Then they need to find a fiduciary or a fiscal, an intermediary or a decision maker who can make those decisions and not be responsible.
That's a good point. Getting an intermediary. Easy for me to say.
I've had a lot of people on Facebook, reach out and say, well, this and this and this situation happened, and I'm resentful and angry or whatever. And then I'll say to them, then your responsibility is to find the person to become the guardian ad litem. And then you step away. Then you don't do it. But you don't just drop them. You don't just not do something. You put in place that one thing that then means that person is cared for, but you walk away.
Like I always said with the staff where my mom lived, I was the captain of her care team. Mm-hmm. And I because I witnessed families of residents being demanding, and I kept thinking, you're going to go home and leave your loved one with these people, and you've just alienated them.
You just
like, this is stupid. Like, yes. Yeah, I'm like, now, I never saw anything bad, and they did not have, there was, the 3 years my mom lived there was a very stable core of caregivers. Mm-hmm. One guy who I thought maybe wasn't a good fit for that job, did leave. So I was like, okay, that's cool. I didn't feel badly when that turnover happened, but it was like, they would call me and say, like one day, I think they called me. A lot of times they'd wait until mom and I were coming back from whatever we had done to let me know that mom needed these personal care items but I think the one day when the caregiver that was in charge of my mom called me up and says, your mama need new shoes. And I was like, are you kidding me? And that's when I was like, crap. When we bought the new shoes 2 years ago, probably should have bought multiple pairs because my mom didn't recognize new things as hers.
Right.
So fortunately, we found a similar pair. I had the clerk at the store, the cashier, cut the tags off. I asked my mom to put the new shoes on, so she walked out of them. The old shoes went in the box. I tossed them in the trunk of my car, and I thought, okay, they're similar enough. She shouldn't, there's not an option. So I was like, huh. But, it just, you're never not part. I mean, you can decide not to be a part of their life, but I always figured I was the captain of the team, and it required a team. So.
And it
I just wish
definitely does.
Oh yeah. And it made it a lot easier because I felt like I had them to talk to, and they would say things like, when my mom started getting a lot more difficult to deal with, they'd be like, your mom was so easy. She was so easygoing. I was like, you didn't know her when you were a teenager. And then they'd laugh and I could tell them stories, and it was supportive of me, which I knew, but I knew it more after,
right?
Like, well, I didn't see my mom the last 2 weeks of her life because of COVID. And I was like really missing talking to them, not just as a support, but just somebody that understood my situation. So sure. I can see how these cruises are so beneficial, not just for the education or the respite or the memories, but just all of it, and just kind of opening your eyes to new ways of thinking about caregiving. It's just, I think everybody should, this is coming out the end of March, beginning of April, just a time for people to start planning their big trip for this year.
Yeah, for sure.
It's elite cruises and vacations, right?
Correct.
I knew the first two words were right. It was the and vacations part. Her website is going to be linked in the show notes as well as the episode I did with her, like, I don't know, 100 years ago.
100 years ago. Yep.
Way pre-COVID, so that you guys can also listen to Kathy talk and then find a vacation that's right for you and your loved one.
Yep. And then if people are interested in finding out a little bit more about me, I do a free monthly workshop every month for family caregivers to learn how to help support their loved one with dementia. So if they want to sign up for one of my free workshops, I'd welcome to have your guests.
Awesome. And that will also be linked in the episode notes. There's a lot of great stuff if you just, scroll down. A lot of hot links, previous episodes that are related, sponsors you guys should check out, and obviously all the information about the guest and the topic. So we're going to let Lisette go. Maybe her luggage will find its way back home.
Oh, all I can tell you is I did another promotional live earlier today, and my makeup was on the baggage that was coming and arrived 10 minutes before I had to go onto the video, and I had just enough time to put my face on and not look like death warmed over.
Well, now you probably need those Apple AirTags, because I always see those little stories where somebody's like, well, I know where my luggage is, and you can see like a little map where the AirTag is, and, you're in New Jersey and they're in, Texas or wherever. And I
knew exactly where they were. My one flight landed very close to the other one. I was like the last person back onto the new flight. And, I had, thankfully it was in the same terminal, or I would not have made it. And I knew getting on the airplane, my luggage was not going to make it. I knew it. It was just too close. It was much too close of a layover. We were late on the one end, and I'm like, I was just grateful to get my makeup so that I could put my face on before I showed up on somebody's video.
Oh, modern life is so crazy. Well, I appreciate this. Hopefully, the rest of your luggage will reappear in the next
Oh, it's
couple
here.
of hours.
I have everything in the laundry. Life is good. I can move on. I have underwear for tomorrow.
All the important things. But you don't have a steward to handle those things for
I
you. So
know,
bummer.
which is really sad because they were very, very good at what they did.
Yes, it's like what years ago we were between homes because we sold our house and the new home that was being built wasn't ready. So we lived with my paternal grandmother for 3 months, and she had a washer and dryer that was like almost as old as me. And I think, let's see, this was in 2003. So yeah, I was in my 30s. So yeah, the washer and dryer were really old. They were chocolate brown, if that gives you any clue. And so we just took our clothes to the full service laundromat. So it was a dry cleaner and laundromat, but they also had the wash and fold service. Holy cow, was that a good deal?
No kidding.
Especially if you didn't take too many pairs of jeans, which this was during the summer. So we didn't, because they did it by the pound. So things like towels and jeans and other heavy items you might want to do yourself and hang to dry outside. But yeah, it was really nice.
You bring up a really good point related to caregivers. If a caregiver can find small ways of decreasing the burden of housekeeping on themselves by doing a wash and fold or getting a housekeeper once a week to clean, we think about it in terms of, I cannot necessarily afford it, but can you really not afford it? What does it give you back?
Exactly.
If you can invest a little bit of money in these activities that can support you longitudinally, you will have the strength to do this for the long haul.
Yep. And a housekeeper is a lot cheaper than in-home caregivers.
For sure.
Well, this is awesome. It sounds like we could talk for another hour, but I'm going to let you go.
I'm never going to have trouble with something to say.
me either. I appreciate this, and we should do this again sometime.
Yeah, we should. We definitely should. Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. And for fun, here is a, quote, bad caregiver joke. What did the caregiver say when their loved one forgot their own birthday? No worries, every day with you is a celebration. We'll just have cake again tomorrow. And here is a highlight from next week's episode.
There was a time where I took my dad to the cemetery on, I believe it was Mother's Day. And we went to visit his mother and his sister that passed away in 1992. And then we went to go visit my mom, who was buried there. And my dad broke down. That was 11 years after the fact, and it seemed like it was just the other day where he became very emotional, and I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know how to handle my dad's emotion. So we went for a car ride. We went for a car ride to deflect and redirect him. But the whole day afterwards, I could tell something was weighing heavy on him. So fast forward to my brother's death, I threw out that lifeline. One, because I needed support. I need support from individuals that understood the severity of this situation. Because I needed to remain normal. I need to be strong for my dad, but also compartmentalize the traumatic emotions that I'm going through.
Thanks for listening today, and we'll be back in your ears again next Tuesday. Please support our sponsors, for they help us bring this show to you for free.